Hey, this is Steve from Cold Water Paddler. Today I'm going to be doing a quick disassembly for a 1951 Coleman 200 lantern. This disassembly will be similar to a Coleman 202 and a 200A as well. Well, let's get started. Now, this thing was already disassembled, and I repainted the fount because of 1951. They're brass, and I had no paint left on it whatsoever. So I repainted that already, which is why it was disassembled. But we don't want to struggle with disassembling. We're just going to start disassembling as if it was all easy. Sometimes it's not. This vent nut on top can be rusted sometimes, so you might have to work at that. We remove the bail next, which is just a piece of steel. It's flexible. Pull it out. Remove the vent. We'll wash that. These are the little ear tabs where that bail goes in, by the way. I'm going to remove the globe very carefully. You don't want to bang these things and get a little cracking on this. No fun. And I always take it and set it very far away because I don't want to be wrenching on this thing and accidentally bang a wrench into it and break it by accident. So that's no fun. Next thing we want to do is remove this nut here in the middle, and then we'll remove this the frame and then the generator jam nut. So 7/16 wrench on that to remove that. Only one nut holding the frame on, so that's pretty nice. Take that off. Set that aside. And I like to put the nut back on because there's a washer under here, and I don't want to be messing with the lantern, have that thing fall off, hit the floor, and then go chase it down for 20 minutes. Not my idea of a good time. Also 7/16 on the generator jam nut. When you take this off, it might not come off easily. You can see there's a hook that goes into the eccentric block in here. Turn up the tip cleaner lever, it should come right off. Now, I'd like to take this collar off, but I can't. So you can see that it won't go around this nut without getting a little bit creative with this by squeezing it or doing something weird. I don't want to do that. So what I want to do is remove the valve knob and the valve stem and that nut. Be careful with this little tiny screw here. It holds it on. Alright, there's the instruction disc for the knob. Set that on the side. I'm going to open this up a little bit. And then we're going to take a 1/2-inch wrench and loosen this. Now it's already been loosened. And as you remove this, spin the valve stem at the same, a different rate than the packing nut, because trying to do it together, if the packing's really tight, which it was on this one, the two will bind against each other. So this packing normally lives inside of this packing nut, and if it's been over tightened at some point during its life, it'll make it very hard to turn the valve stem, and you're always concerned about breaking the valve knob, the valve wheel. You don't want to do that, so I just chipped it out of there, and I'm going to put a new one in. So now, if we turn this stem in the right direction, we can get the frame rest or collar. All right, I don't know if you can see that, but it's got the model number and cleaned up nicely. Not too bad for 1951 lantern. Now, to remove the valve, there's a couple ways you can do this. What I did on this particular one was I put this in a vise, a bench vise, and then I put some like rubber around there and then clamped it in there, and then I could use two hands and then loosen this up. If you don't have that, another way you can do it, if you happen to have the tools, is to use a strap wrench. Some people like these, other people don't. The thing about it is you always need to make sure you're around this section on the bottom where the steel plate is at. If you get it up too high and try to use this when you're loosening it, you almost certainly will put a dent in a brass fount. So be very careful if you're going to use a strap wrench. I've used it many, many times successfully. I would put that in there, hold it like that. Don't grab it by the threaded end like I almost just did, and bring the something like a crescent wrench or adjustable wrench to the side, and then you can begin loosening that. It helps, by the way, if you have another person to stabilize the tools. But like I said, this one's already loose, so I'm going to remove this. There's a fuel air tube on the side, still attached, so I'm going to set this on the side. I'm going to remove the fuel cap. Now, almost always, if the fuel cap's never been replaced and it's more than probably 30 years old, you should replace that. A lot of times when you're running the lantern, you can't understand why it's losing pressure quickly. The fuel cap gasket may be the culprit, and that it's dried and needs to be replaced. So if you tighten this up really hard and then get a nice fitting screwdriver on there so you don't mar this. I have like it's almost like a gunsmithing type screwdriver, hollow ground, so it fits nicely in there. And I can remove that screw. This is what's known as a 3-piece fuel cap for the screw. And then the outer cap and the inner cap, which is where this gasket goes. Right, so when I put the lantern back together, I'll be putting in a new gasket. I chipped out the old one, and I'll be putting in a new one. And the last couple things here is there's 2 screws on these older lanterns instead of that ring that you see on a lot of the newer type Coleman products. This here, now these screws are tough to find replacements for, so they're very tiny, so be very careful that you don't lose it. I do have a couple lanterns that are missing one of these screws at least. It's a real pain. Keep track of them, so be careful. Try not to drop it myself. Okay, both are removed. Set them on the side. This cap a lot of times is stuck, and actually after I repainted this, the paint was so thick that the cap didn't fit properly. When I tried to remove it, I actually ripped off some of the paint, so I'll have to touch that up later. If you can't get it loose, use a piece of material and a pair of pliers around it, and then you can usually get something, a grip on there without damaging anything. All right, in this case, I already have it loosened. You can see where I scraped away some of the paint to make that easier to put on. Okay, so here's the pump, the leather pump cup. You're going to want to oil that and stretch it out and make sure that it's not damaged in any way. Let me see inside of here. Not sure if you can see that. There's a square rod. That's the check valve stem. I'm going to remove that. What I needed to do on this lantern when I first got it was that the check valve ball was itself stuck down in there, and I needed to put some solvent in down at the bottom and get that loosened up. I would have removed it. The way I would do that is using a check valve removal tool, which gets threaded inside of there, and then this other tool with these ears on the end fits down in the check valve. I went to go do that. This one was really tight, and I thought, well, if it's working, why risk breaking anything? So we'll just leave it as is. If later on, if I know it keeps getting stuck, I'll try cleaning it again, and if not, then I'll have to go after removing it. In any case, so the lantern's now fully disassembled. From the major perspective, minor things are this fuel air tube. This is an item here that a lot of times if your lantern doesn't light properly, what's wrong with it? You try to light it and just won't light. And sounds like a lot of air, but nothing's happening. Well, there's this little rod right here that's inside of this fuel air tube. What happens is when you open the valve, this rod will become retracted, or when it's barely open, that rod stays inside of this fuel hole at the bottom where the pickup is. And what happens is just a small amount of fuel comes through here, a lot of air comes from the top, and it mixes to create a vapor, because when the lantern is cold, the generator, which normally would create the vapor, is still cold, so it can't do that on its own. So Coleman uses this method to create a vapor, and then once the lantern is hot, you open up the valve all the way, which you probably can't see that, but right there, that rod gets retracted, and now a full stream of fuel comes, and it doesn't require a lot of air from the fount itself. So some things to keep in mind. You can disassemble these generators and clean them. As I mentioned, I will be replacing the fuel cap gasket. All of this would normally get washed, but I've already got it clean. I also would clean out the fount, get any particulates out of there from old fuels that get crusty and dried up, or maybe some rust inside of it. Okay, well, that's it for the disassembly, and thanks for checking it out.